That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
No tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
Fairly learned here.
Welcome to the MOTN-Trospective. This is the maiden voyage of the Masters of the Nerdiverse presents Introspective, where we take a look at one of pop culture's most beautiful, I would say, franchises. May it be from comics, video games, or movies. And we do a deep dive and give you our 2 cents on the franchises as a whole, our experiences with them, and where we think they could be going in the future. I'm, of course, your scared human being, Mike G. And with me, as always, is...
Austin. Hi. Hello. Bye.
And that was our podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember to recycle.
I hate all of you. You suck. Bye.
He's so mad at you guys. What did you do? Why did you make Ozzy Austin upset?
Exactly. Who knows, right? Hard to tell.
Hard to tell. You know, it's hard to tell. And today we're talking. Can I make my tongue jack up? Today we're going to be reviewing one of the greatest film and television franchises known to man. Up there with penicillin.
Is it that intelligence?
Is it though? Scarring children, generations, spanning millions of years. One of the best horror novels I've ever read as a child. This is Stephen King's It. What is it, Austin?
What is it is a song that was sung back in the day, but it's been a hot minute since then.
I was thinking of This Is It by Kenny Loggins.
The Sick. What is it? The Sick. What is it? That's the song I'm thinking of. There we go. Okay, so anywho, It is one of those great Stephen King novels where it's really creepy and just really god-awful in a lot of ways, but in the right kind of reason as well. Like human trauma, abuse, murder, psychotherapy, sexual assault, all that fun stuff.
But also small town sensibilities, children galvanizing, sins of the past. You know, has
Tim Curry in a murder's clown costume, which is fantastic. Tim
Curry just chewing every scene he's in. There's a lot going on with it in general. So this is how we're going to do it, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be breaking up this introspective into 3 parts. The first part, which you'll be listening to today, is an overview of the 1990s directed by Tommy Lee Wallace's It, that has a star-studded cast that we're going to be breaking down a combined version of that 2-part miniseries that aired on television so many years ago, back in 1990, where little Mikey Short Pants was wearing cross colors, Keds, and eating a Ninja Turtle pie. Austin, this is not a facetious question. Did you exist in 1990? Were you on Earth?
No, I did not exist in 1990.
You were not on Earth back then?
Nope, it's only 2 years later.
Okay, fair enough. And that's when the Earth was graced with the presence of the Aussian. Back then, this was not meant for children, but there's a big fat clown on the front. So kids watched, and parents, and it's on TV, right? It's safe. How bad could it be? But it ended up being one of the most traumatic experiences in my young life. Seeing Tim Curry be so comfortable in his insanity in this movie, this series, it really shifted our generation and kind of made people really reevaluate what should be on TV and what shouldn't. You know what I mean? It was just a little, children in peril is always a touchy subject, right? And this movie is all about children in peril and how they deal with it, how they don't deal with it, how the town of Derry deals with it, and that spanning pretty much two generations. These kids as children, I would say anywhere, kind of in the budding of their childhood, you know, that stage when you're not yet a teenager, but not yet a kid, but still not a kid. You know what I'm saying, Austin?
Yeah, these kids are right at that cusp of being actual like teenagers and not really at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not a girl, but not yet a woman kind of situation. You know what I'm saying? To put a little Britney Spears.
Let's not go with that anymore because that's kind of odd.
Britney, call my Britney heads out there. Did you read this book any time in your life? Did you read it by any chance?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I didn't hear that bit at all.
No worries. Did you read it by any chance?
Oh, yes. So as a kid, I actually read it quite thoroughly from beginning to end. And that was when I was I would say probably 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I've reread it recently as an adult when I was like 20, let's say 5 or 26 a few years ago. And honestly, it's a good book.
It's great. It's one of my favorites. Yeah, it's one of my favorite Stephen King books. It's like top 3 up there with The Stand and my personal favorite, the Night Flyer, because it has the Night Flyer. It's Night Flyer rules. But for this book, and I read this at a very young age. This was one of those where I almost got suspended because the teacher told us to pick a book to read, and I brought to school Silence of the Lambs and It in like 3rd grade.
That's not a great idea at all, actually.
No, and I remember my mother fighting for my independence when the teacher said, "Why is he reading that?" It's like, "Well, he's reading it, isn't he?" He's like, "Yeah." He was like, "Isn't it like a 5th grade reading level book?" He's like, "Yeah." So my kid is the head of the class. He's like, "Yeah." Then leave him alone. Let him read what he wants to read. And I felt so proud of my mother that day.
There you go. Well, I will have to say there are actually quite a few differences between this movie and the book.
Yes. Some differences that are absolutely necessary. Because the book goes places that even Stephen King himself has regretted they went in a weird way. And I don't know if we're going to discuss that in this introspective. Maybe we should, because this is a macro view of the book, its characters, especially as it pertains to the TV series and the movies. I don't necessarily want to do a deep dive of a blow by blow of it, like every single scene, every single, I would say every single moment, but I would like to do a dissection of its characters. Because one thing Stephen King can do is write characters very, very well. Write situations, write growth points. And I have a list of the actual main cast here that I just want to kind of go through some names and see what triggers in you when you hear that name. You want to play? You want to play that little game here?
Heck yeah.
Absolutely. So let's run this down. Richie Tozer.
You know, beep, beep, Richie.
Beep, beep, Richie. Richie's an interesting character, both in the book and in the, I would say, live iterations, because he's the one to me that always felt like he was the scaredest of the group in the weird way.
I could agree with that, because he also comes across some of the worst imagery, like in the book.
Yes, he is. Like, a clown is one thing. Richie's the one that actually sees the werewolf, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And from the book, it made it seem like the Michael Jackson Thriller werewolf, which is the most scariest werewolf of all time. Don't argue with me. Michael Jackson Thriller werewolf is best werewolf. But Richie always seemed to be that one guy, and I can relate to this because I'm the same way, that laughs through his trauma. You know what I mean? Even as a kid. He was the toughest, but in regards of just sheer bravery out of the Losers Club. But I think, like you said, he just saw, it tried its hardest with him in a weird way.
It really did in a lot of ways, and it's kind of funny that it messed with Richie the most sometimes, but at the same time, it's really hard to kind of say, oh, well, he deserved it, or he was the hardest to break because he was a jokester. It's like, well, yeah, that's just who Richie was. So, yeah.
Right. And as famously played in this TV series by Seth Green, a young Seth Green.
Yeah, like I forgot about that until I saw this movie again. It's like, oh, that's Seth Green, huh?
Reminds you like how old Seth Green is, right? Like
a little bit.
Like how old was Seth Green playing a teenager in Idle Hands in like 2000 or something?
Oh man, I loved Idle Hands. That was such a good movie.
You know what I'm saying? Like how old was Seth Green when he started Robot Chicken? You know what I mean? Like he's got to be in his 50s by now, right?
No, he's what? No, he's not in his 50s.
He's got to be super old, right?
I super doubt that. I need to look this up now.
Yeah, like how old is Seth Green, dude? Like hold on. Like, cause he just seems like he's been in the industry forever, man.
He's 46.
I was close.
50s and 46 is a bit different.
He's cruising for a bruising there, dude.
Oh my word!
And the adult version of Richie in this series is played by the legendary Harry Anderson from Night Court, which is awesome because I love that. I love the Harry Anderson, and I especially love Night Court. You remember Night Court, Austin?
No.
Night Court with Harry Anderson.
I really don't.
We're gonna watch some Night Court for the next MOTN news, but that also kind of points me to how star-studded this cast is. You know what I mean? And I don't want to bounce around these names, so we will get to there. But just in last thoughts of Richie is that Richie wasn't the standout of the Losers Club, but he shined enough to where throughout the entire series and entire book, he really was there when they needed him. And then he wasn't. And then he got, there's moments where he got cold feet and he felt, as an adult, and their adult side of things was really kind of the most telling part of their story, to kind of see where they went, and that's in the version we watched of this was this weird truncated kind of phantom edit of it from Amazon Prime. It wasn't the clean chapter 1, chapter 2, right?
No, it wasn't. It was just like one continuous movie, which
was good.
I kind of liked more, honestly.
It was edited very well, I would say. But with that, you don't get that separation of feeling, right? Because they blurred in a lot of, flashbacks and mise en scène, that when you're watching the series, it's like, this is where the kids are and this is where they turned out. Where how we saw it was kind of a blend of that, which kind of muddied that separation, but you still can feel the pain of each individual character. And the character I'm going to move on to next is Eddie Kasbrak. Good old Eddie.
Eddie is
stuttering Eddie.
God, he's such a different character between even just the book and the movie itself as well.
Yeah, because how was his character? I don't remember. How was his characterization in the book?
In the book, he's a lot more dependent on his mom, but he's also more successful. Mm-hmm. In the book, he's got like this whole limousine service, and it's like making him a ton of money. It's like he's really successful. In the movie, it feels like he's just stuck with his mom constantly, like he can never get away. Right.
You know what I mean? And it wasn't Eddie that stuttered. It was Bill. Sorry, mixed up.
Oh yeah, no, Bill totally stuttered. Yeah.
Yeah. Eddie is a weird character to me. And Eddie was the hypochondriac, right?
Eddie was the hypochondriac because he was also asthmatic and said he had a whole slew of just horrible bullcrap in his life.
Okay. My biggest gripe with this series as an asthmatic, and it irked me every single time I saw it, is that they were using their inhaler wrong. They're holding the inhaler upside down. Any asthmatic will tell you never hold the inhaler upside down. You get none of the inhaler juice when you hold it upside down.
The inhalant juice.
The inhalant. So I saw that was an instant, like, the production designer couldn't have walked over and just fixed that. By the way, this is the sound of a real inhaler.
Just made it slightly better.
Just, corrected them a little bit. But Eddie, as an adult, in the series, like you said, didn't really have much to go on. He was more of a sympathetic, almost, I hate to say, pathetic character. You know what I mean? Versus his book counterpart where he made something of himself. You know what I mean?
You're not wrong. And it's really bad to say, but you're not really that far off. Because it really just does feel like he's just screwed from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's got nothing going for him.
Yeah. And even as a kid, and it's that, tiger mom, doting mother thing that has ruined countless lives. It continues to do so.
I have to be with my baby boy. I have to be with my little baby boy.
You don't need friends when you have the best friend in the world, your mother, kind of situation.
Yeah.
And that stuck with him his whole life, that mentality. And
oh yeah, like that was just
burned into his brain.
That ruined him more than anything else.
More than anything else, like the inhaler placebo. That's one thing. The whole Munchausen syndrome. That whole all that fun. But it was really that good old mommy dearest love that kind of wrecked him. Now I just recently watched the '90s version, and Eddie dies at the end of this movie. Yeah.
He does.
At the end of the series. I don't remember.
I mean, spoiler alert. Yeah, he just dies.
He just dies. In this introspective, this is infinite spoilers. We're trying to do the whole walk around the world here. But do you think his death was warranted to give the impact of the situation? He could have lived, I think.
Yeah, because that... I'm trying to remember. I think that might have happened in the book.
That's what I was going to ask you. Because I think it happened in the book too, but I don't remember. It's been so many years since I've read the book from top to bottom.
It's been a hot minute.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about Eddie, and I'm thinking about his motivations and his contributions to the Losers Club. This is battery acid, spraying the inhaler juice, which didn't affect the monster because it was upside down and the juice never touched them. Anyway, I'm not going to let that go. But Eddie, he wasn't, one of the standout characters of the Losers Club, but I think he fit a certain niche that needed to be there with any kind of ensemble cast.
He's the little lion that could character, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Right. He shows courage when it really counts for the majority of the series. Like he steps up. Like he's the one who steps up to the local town bully, which is the most irritating bully of
Henry
history.
Bowers is I don't understand how nobody gives a damn that Henry's going to kill somebody by the time he turns 15.
He's been yelling, "I'm going to kill you" at the top of his lungs across the entire town, and none of the adults bother to do anything about it.
None of the adults are just like, that's a problematic thing. Nah, they're just like, you go get him, Tiger. You can do it.
Go get him, Tiger. You can
do it.
You got this. And it's one of those things where it's like, geez, man. You know what I mean? And because I'm not seeing his name in top billing, which is really making me mad, IMDb, I'm like wondering if I have to. He's one of the original Losers Club, and his name is not amongst the top. Oh, there it is. I'm super blind. We can get to him later. But let's talk about Stanley. Good old
Stanley.
The sad...
Stanley. Go kill yourself, Stanley.
Wowzers. That's not funny. Wowzers.
No. It's funny. It's funny considering what happens with like the first friggin' scene with him.
Stanley, man. Stanley is...
He fucking got it.
But he didn't get it he got it out of sheer guilt, though. Not even guilt. He got it out of sheer terror. Cowardice. Out of sheer terror. Like, but then again, according to Stanley, he was the only one to see it in its true form and live to tell the tale. You know what I mean? I don't know about you, but if I saw a cosmic being, I would probably go...
Is that what it was? Is that what it was? He saw it for what it really...
Yeah, there's a scene where Bill has to save him because he just sees Stanley running from the ether, and he's like, "Yeah, let's go." And once Stanley calmed down, he's like, "Yeah, I saw its true face." And it wrecked him.
I think I remember that now. That sounds about right.
Yeah, so I mean, you grow to be 40 with this image of this cosmic being in your brain every day, and he seemed to be doing fine for himself.
It wasn't in his brain every day. Like it was actually like not a thing.
Right, until it got triggered again when Mike called him. Right, that's how everybody turned out. Everybody totally. That's the miracle of Derry that everyone just forgets. Right, there's like there's this fog over every inhabitant of that town. So whenever Mike called any of them, it was this traumatic experience that they just had in the moment. And for Stanley, it proved to be too much. Stanley was really the standoff character out of the Losers Club. He didn't really have, and maybe it's different in the book, but to me, he just didn't really have a personality. To me, he was the odd duck out.
I mean, he really doesn't have a personality for much of diddly anything, honestly, throughout most of the book. And he's just like, he's the most apprehensive character in both versions of the book and the movie, honestly. Like, the only thing that really got him going was, I guess, he's Jewish, and that's it.
That's kind of the only, and that's not really the only personality trait that Richie would point out. Oh yeah, he's he would say he's Jewish and he's XYZ, and then Stanley would burn Richie back. So, he has hypertension, and he you just have to tell him to be quiet every once in a while. Beep Richie, right? But Stanley just didn't seem like, he seemed like the red shirt of the Losers Club, even as kids, right? Mm-hmm. He was just kind of there in the background. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm trying to remember when the Losers Club was initially formed, how did Stanley even encounter them? Or was he a friend of Richie? Is that how that happened?
I mean, I think that's what it was.
Because I know him and Richie were tight, and of course he doesn't have much to do as an adult, because as you said, at the beginning he was kind of the sacrifice to remind you that this is serious business. But it kind of sucks because it didn't even visit him to warrant that kind of response. He, like you said, he just had that flashback, and that was enough for him just to say, forget it. I'm not even going to, he could have just ignored it and lived his life. But I guess that flashback was so severe that it caused him to take his life, which is crazy. But then again, I don't know. That's the way Stephen wrote him. So Stanley's one of those characters that I would just wish had more to chew on. I wish he had a bigger role in the second part of the series, other than being the dinner bell.
Casualty.
Yeah, the casualty, So let's pour one out for Stanley. On to a completely different end of the spectrum. Let's talk about Beverly.
Oh, God, Bev.
Got to unload with Beverly.
Jesus.
Beverly Marsh, the one lady of the group.
Let's put it this way. In the book, she's a lot worse off. In the movie, she has a bit more backbone. But in the book, man, Beverly's a piece of work, even from, as an adult. Just like Stephen King wrote sex scenes at one point.
And one thing I want to say about this series is the treatment of women in this series is very particular, to where women are either kind of being played as kind of being manipulated by the men in the series. May it be Beth being talked down to by her executive husband / boyfriend, whoever that asshole guy was. It
was her boyfriend, I believe.
Boyfriend, right?
Yeah, and thank God they did not do anything with him in the movie, because in the book he is
he's pure scum, right? He's pure scum. Right?
He's evil. He's not scum. He's just straight up evil.
That's what I'm saying. And Bill's girlfriend has a scene where she's with a movie executive, and he pretty much tells her on no uncertain terms, either sleep with me and forget Bill, or I'm going to ruin your movie career. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, why are women being treated in this series this way? You know what I mean? Like, even there's no favorable interaction outside of Beverly and Ben that holds women in any kind of high regard. That's really bothersome to me. Am I reading that wrong?
You're kind of not. In the book, it's a lot worse because Bill cheats on his wife with Bev really blatantly, and it's kind of screwy.
And there's something to be said about flawed characters. You know what I mean? A flawed character is a more interesting character. But an irredeemable character kind of is hard to root for him. You know what I mean? But in regards to Beverly, and her stagnation, I would say, because she's one of the more stagnant characters, where she grew up in a troubled household with an abusive, both mentally, physically, and if I remember correctly, sexually father, to where she felt isolated and fragile for most of her young life, found refuge with the Losers Club and went on their merry adventure to then defeat the titular It. But then as an adult, she's still in the same rut. Just a different man. You know what I mean? And she even makes a point of that, like I'm so blind. How have I been so blind this my whole life? And it makes you, like you said, these characters have it rough, man. Outside of Stanley, I think Beverly has it the most rough between everybody else in the Losers Club, man.
Yeah,
she just doesn't get a good shake until the absolute end of the series.
It's Bev.
And Beverly's like fragileness in the and mind you, I'm fresh on the 90s because I just watched it. Her fragileness in that entire series, but then she, like you said, she's also she stands up to her horrible boyfriend. She stands up to It, but in those in between shots, she just seems so either out of it or completely. She reminds me of Jean Grey in a weird way. You know how when the X-Men start fighting, Jean Grey will just pass out?
Yeah.
Scott! Just pass out, you know?
God, what a bad character development that entire...
Don't get me started on Jean Grey. That's a whole nother introspective. But I think Beverly as a character was well written. It's just dark, man.
Oh, 100%. Just like it's always been bad.
It's just all bad all the time. And the return to Derry helped her get out of her rut. And a little bit because she understood the severity of having to complete their promise to the point where she broke her fear of her boyfriend before he beat the mess out of her again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she had to escape him pretty much. So she found some courage there. And she pretty much took Pennywise's attacks, in stride. She wasn't as destroyed as, let's say, Bill was. You know what I mean? In certain scenes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and there's, of course, the children's exit. Do you even want to talk about that? The exit?
No, let's not.
Moving on.
Yeah,
read the book.
We're not talking about that.
Read the book? Okay. Read the book. Speaking of someone who read a lot, let's talk about Mike Hanlon. Good old Mike. African-American representation.
Mike's pretty cool.
Mike's cool. Mike is... He's like the audience in a weird way. Mike's like the observer. Even as an adult, he's kind of the... Like, he called himself the light, the light keeper. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's the one who kind of observes the whole thing, documented the whole thing. His father was a historian, so he became a historian kind of situation. And as a kid, when those jerks were messing with him, in the show, they were messing with him just for being a kid they didn't know. In the book, I think they messed with him because he was black. He didn't back down from them. At the same time, there were 3 kids in his face with knives. So any of us would have been like, ugh.
Yeah, anybody would have been just like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, so him finding refuge with the Losers Club and him being the unsung glue of the Losers Club, I always found really interesting because they didn't join until he became that part of Voltron they needed. You know what I mean? He galvanized them in a way. And he, of course, held them to their promise as they're 40-somethings now, completely dismissed from that entire part of their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did Mike cause the death of 2 people? Maybe.
It's a possible... yeah?
Yeah. If he didn't bother them with this, would Eddie would Stanley be still alive? Maybe. Right?
That's a hard maybe, man.
But it needed to be done, man. It was going to keep doing this forever, dude.
Oh, 100%.
in his town, right? And him being the only one who maintained any sort of memory of it was kind of his sin to carry, you know. And when he saw it happening again, he couldn't help himself but bring it back to the Losers Club, like, hey, we got to Avengers Assemble kind of situation, and spun the whole thing in motion. But as a kid, Mike was very interesting. He seemed to be the smartest one of the group. He had a good head on his shoulders.
100% he always was. And
Yeah.
even in like the reboot they made, he was the most athletic one too.
Yeah, man. Mike was just you know how in Big Trouble in Little China, how where's Kurt Russell, the camera is on him the whole time, but he's not the hero of the story. It's the other guy. You know,
Yeah.
Kurt Russell's kind of like the sidekick who gets the camera shot. Like, Mike is kind of the unsung hero in the macro view, like stepping back. He's the hero of the story, but the camera never does that for him. You know, the focus never shifts directly on him for any particular thing other than the reassembly. And towards the end where he's injured and couldn't really be there for the final battle, his presence is still felt because he kept the silver nuggets that they used to take out Pennywise at the end. So
Right.
his presence was still felt, even though he was laid up in bed somewhere because of that wacky moment we'll talk about when we get to that character. Let's talk about Ben. Good old Ben.
Ben
Handsome.
is one of my favorite characters, I think.
Ben is interesting. Ben is the Samwise to Bill's Frodo, I would say.
I would agree with that. He's like the plucky secondary character.
Yeah, he's Barney Rubble. He's pretty much Barney Rubble.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. You know, overweight. Also very smart. Grew up to be an award-winning architect. You know, George Costanza would be proud. Played by the late and extremely great John Ritter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just this cast is crazy. Unrequited love of Beverly.
Oh, yeah. Your hair is our embers. January,
I
something
forget,
or other like that.
my heart burns there too, or something like that.
My heart burns there too. Yeah, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. He was very interesting because he was the lovable, like you said, secondary character. Had some really good scares with him, you know, in regards to Pennywise.
Oh, yeah. Poor boy.
Poor boy. Father died in his father died in, the Vietnam War or the Korean War? In Nam? Yeah.
Yeah, and apparently like he's got like a really shitty aunt and like just a really shitty
nephew or cousin or something like that.
Cousin.
Pretty much imagine the family that Harry Potter lived with.
The Dursleys are okay, but they're just kind of really shitty people. I feel like Ben's family are just straight up just abusive favoritists in general.
Like, Ben's family is like, why are you here? I hate that you're here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a good way to put it.
And they will dismiss him and his mother, mind you. It's like, we are stomaching you here because it's our quote unquote Christian duty, right?
Yes, that's what it was. It was a Christian duty to never
abandon family, right? But they antagonized these people every moment they had. You know what I mean? So Ben was never at home. He was always building dams in the middle of the forests and, you know, with his buddies. So he got to kind of do with that. He was the ire of most of the bad kids. I would say vengeance. They really hated him for being fat. They really hated him. I don't know why. They were so mad that he was fat, and they were, you know, to the point where I forget. I didn't dedicate the villains, the true villains, name to memory, but he was trying to cut like his name. Henry Bowers was trying to cut his name into into a stomach, man. Like,
yeah, that kid is that. Like we said earlier, that kid's straight up a psychopath. He's gonna kill somebody one day,
and he almost did. You know what I mean?
He got close. He got very, very close.
Ben, and I want to talk about him next because we keep going back to Henry, but I do want to finish up. Sorry, his name is blanking on me. Good old Ben. That, as a character, I just kind of wanted more of him in a weird way. But we got plenty of him, but especially when his interactions with Beverly. You know what I mean? Like how they started, they found each other through this kind of, through this horrible adventure. You know what I mean? So I just think Ben was one of the more interesting characters.
He had the most going for him. I think he had the most success, but he also had the most trouble because he was constantly just beleaguered by being the fat boy who's new in town.
Yeah, I mean, he lost all his weight. He became successful. When we find him, he's leaving an award ceremony. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That he won. And
he's like architect of the year or something
something crazy like that, right? He designed, I'm trying to think of a Sears Tower or something dumb. But just like with everyone else, the mention of dairy just hits him like a ton of bricks. And he's just like, I guess I got to go to Maine. You know what I mean? Like, sorry, I have to drop everything and go to Maine. Speaking of people who should be dropped, let's talk about Henry Bowers for a little bit.
So in the book, they really give a reason why he's so evil, psychotic.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie, not so much. He's just a dick.
He's just a dick kid, He's just an asshole kid that terrorizes the Losers Club for really no apparent reason. Just because the majority of the Losers Club kids are new to dairy or new to the school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ben is new. Michael's new. I want to say there's one more. Beverly wasn't new, but then again, Michael and Ben were the primary and, irritants to Henry and his weird group of thugs, and one that just did like a burp technique in the movie that irritated the crap out of me.
Oh, I forgot about that stuff. Yeah.
So dumb. What was Henry's problem? Explain to me why in the book was he such a little butt to everybody?
So in the book, it just goes over how his dad just abuses the shit out of him. And he's got just a really bad, how do you put it? He's just got a really bad home life. Like his dad treats women like badly. His potential foster mother is really bad as well. And honestly, he's just got this emotional abuse going on. And these toadies who don't ever tell him no.
Mm-hmm.
That no matter what, he was just always screwed from the beginning.
And the town did nothing to discipline this kid.
No, not really.
They'll send him to the office. The teacher's like, "Oh, Henry, why do you have to be such a jerk to everybody?" They see him and his goons about to cut Michael in the middle of the street. They're like, "Hey, stop that." Kids with switchblades that are illegal. You know what I mean?
Switchblades are illegal, kids. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Put those down. In the times where Henry was confronted by the Losers Club and they galvanized around kicking this kid's ass, which he super needed, you then learn to find out that after the kid's encounter with it somehow talked Henry into owning up to all the recent kid murders that was going around. Like, why would you do that? That's the most perplexing part of the book and of the series and movies. Is like, what did it tell Bowers to be like, yeah, take the ownership of all of this? Was he just possessed by the entity?
It is just so powerfully mentally and psychically. He just destroyed Henry Bowers' fucking tiny little brain.
He sent him to the shadow dimension, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
And the same man was not found. And we come to find out that Henry was in a mental institution the whole time. Kind of like, pseudo mental institution, pseudo jail. You know what I mean? Because he was mentally gone. hair turns stark white from seeing its true form. And then also being the avatar of its mortal vengeance, so to speak, because the rules of it are very weird. And when we talk about it, we're going to get into the rules of it. But I guess one of the rules is that he needed Henry to kind of be that kind of fear-mongering external issue that the adults could fear. That he could get to the adults in a way that it couldn't. You know what I mean? And that's why he utilized Henry.
Yeah.
And, that's the only reason why Henry returned in the second half of this story, to be that external combatant. Because for as much as it will say that it has a hold on children, it doesn't necessarily have the same hold on adults. You know what I mean? At least it doesn't appear to be.
So you think.
Right, so you think. But then again, once we talk about Pennywise itself, we're going to go into some crazy places. But with that, let's round out the Losers Club with Bill. Good old Bill.
Bill, the leader, the stutterer, mushmouth. Lots of ways to describe him.
The protagonist.
The ghost beats its... God, what is that thing he says? That
weird limerick he says, right?
It's a way for him to get past his stuttering, because it's a repetitive phrase, essentially.
I know which one you're talking about.
The ghost beats its fist against the post and something like that. Damn it. Damn it. I'm going to be stuck on this now until I say it myself.
Say it yourself. You're on the podcast. You have to do it now. Even if you look it up, I'll keep talking until you find it. Because this is the Masters of the Nerdiverse podcast. And currently we're talking about it and Bill Denborough, who is our protagonist, the stutterer.
Okay. He thrusts his fists against the posts and still insists he sees the ghosts.
That's very dark.
It's a way for them to kind of, get by and get over his stutter.
Yeah. Because the Mike's call to Bill hits him the hardest out of everybody. Because there's multiple traumas we're dealing with here. He's dealing with the loss of his brother. They're dealing with how it really affected him via his brother. Because it was not very coy with the way it used to attack you. It used his brother, it used the voice of his brother to get a hold of him when he was a kid and increase his stutter, which is just another fear mechanism for him. And we could talk about Bill's little brother in that opening scene, I guess, a little bit more when we talk about Pennywise.
Man, that was a good killer scene, though. You got to admit.
Yeah, one of the best opening scenes of anything ever. You know what I mean? Completely terrifying, completely innocent. In Bill's quest to kind of find out what happened to his brother, and Bill kind of being the Captain America, I would say, of the Losers Club. Not necessarily the hero, not necessarily the focus. He kind of is, because this all kind of stems from his little brother being the first known kind of casualty. Mm-hmm.
Well, no, there's that little girl that's right before them, actually, in the beginning of the movie.
Right.
Laura Ann or something like that.
She's mentioned, right? She's mentioned.
It's distinctly Midwestern in the middle of Derry, Maine, which
they get a lot of traffic, man. There's a lot of new people that go from Derry, Maine that have kids, apparently. You know what I mean? They have a lot of.
Okay.
I don't know why, man. It's I don't make the rules, but I think Bill had the weirdest arc, because Bill had a backwards and forwards progression and regression in this series. Bill was the horror writer. Was Bill the horror writer?
Bill is the horror writer after everything's said and done.
Yes. He's the one who's currently married to an actress where he's writing on a script for. They're in England for some reason.
Because that's where he lived. That's where he just wants to live, because his wife is too good. Yeah.
I'll come with you. I'll follow you to the set, right?
Exactly.
And the moment he hears about it, he becomes a completely different person. And his wife is like, talk to me. What's going on with you? And he's like, nothing. This evil entity is back and me and my friends have to kill it.
He's just like, nah, baby. He's like, nah, girl.
To stay at the house. Stay at the house. And she was like, okay. But Bill finds himself back to Derry, and it's like, and for him, it hits him like a ton of bricks. That he, you know, what happened back then. And if you really think about it, he was kind of ineffectual in the defeat of it. He didn't spray the battery acid, you know, he didn't shoot the slingshot, right? But he was a great friend amongst the Losers Club. And I think he was also one of the glue people that kept them together. He was the one who initiated the pact to come back.
Yes.
Even though he was the one that really did enforce it, it was Michael. You know, but how would he know? Right? So I guess it was left to Michael to be the enforcer of the pact.
Yeah, because Michael's the only one who stayed behind in Derry, so he's the only one who could be reminded in the end.
Correct. I don't know. How do you feel about Bill?
I like Bill, but there's just a lot to like really unpack with him, because he's even like as an adult, he's kind of dismissive. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, he's more likable because he's more understandable. He just lost Georgie, his brother. He makes sense. But like, it's really hard to say if he's truly deserving of the limelight, of the spotlight.
I kind of feel the same way. Like, there's something about him where he's not the hero, but the camera puts it on him that he's the hero. You know, it's a weird thing where he doesn't necessarily say the rallying speech. He doesn't deliver the final blow. But he also is a glue guy. He is the nucleus kind of
he's the one who holds the party together, for sure.
Exactly. But he doesn't really stand out. I think characters like Richie and Michael stand out a little bit more overall. You know what I mean? In the Losers Club. Even Beverly, you know what I mean?
And that's because they have better
like character urgency,
personality.
Yeah.
They're more memorable because they're more interesting characters. That's really what it boils down to.
I totally agree. I think that's what I'm trying to say without saying it, is that overall Bill is not that interesting of a character outside of his circumstances, outside of what happened to him versus who he is. And really the only real interesting parts of Bill is when he's an adult and his flashbacks start to literally mentally degrade him back to being a kid. Even his wife says, I didn't know you had a stutter, right? He's like, I haven't stuttered since I was a kid. She had no idea. That's crazy.
It's been a long while.
Yeah. It's probably been like 20 years since the guy had a stutter. You know what I mean? And it just hits him like a ton of bricks the second Michael gives him that call. And now he's right back into it. Even Bowers didn't really have any big problems with him. You know, he wasn't, you know, an object of Bowers, you know, anger rather. Beverly really didn't have any true like connection to him, right? Well, you said we didn't want to talk about that.
Let's not.
Okay.
And second thought, let's just not.
Understood. And with that, let's talk about Tim Curry as Pennywise.
He is the best
ever.
I think he's just like a charismatic Pennywise.
Isn't Tim Curry just a gift to the earth? Like Tim Curry in his prime, like legend Tim Curry, Rocky Horror Picture Tim Curry, Tim Curry. You can't get any much better. Clue Tim Curry, you know, like you can't get much better than that. You know what I mean? And we're going to be talking about the newer films and other episodes, but something that Tim Curry brings to Pennywise that isn't brought to modern audiences is that he's so likable. He's very alluring. You know,
he's got pizzazz.
He has pizzazz. When he talks, you could read his facial expressions, the way his cheeks and lips move, his eyes, Like, he just totally captures every single scene he's in. Like, his subtle ticks on how he brings Pennywise to life, how he talks to children, how he thinks children like to be talked to, like in regards to earning their trust. And that's all conceptualized in the opening scene where he's luring Bill's brother into the grate. And Pennywise is like, hey, what's your name? He's like, I don't talk to strangers. Fair enough. I'm Pennywise the Dancing Clown. What was his brother's name?
Georgie.
You're Georgie. Of course, Georgie. You're Georgie. We're not friends. Now that's over with. He makes the kid laugh, right? And he's approachable in a dark way. Whereas in the new series, freaking Pennywise is terrifying, dude. Like, I wouldn't touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. But in every scene that Tim Curry's in, he's just electric, man. His jokes are so bad that they're great. You know what I mean? His accent, like his body language, goes from hilarious to terrifying. And one of my favorite scenes of this series is when Ben is driving into town, right? And Ben stops at the side of the road and kind of gets a flashback when he was a kid, when he first met I think, Bill. And he gets back in the car and he sees Pennywise on the side of the road. and Tim Curry goes from waving like a dancing clown to just pointing at him in a sinister way to back to just waving again. It gives me chills every time I see it. It's such a good, like, body acting turn, dude. I absolutely love it, man. It's insane. What are your thoughts overall about Pennywise, the character, from the book to the TV series to the movies?
I think Pennywise makes a lot of sense for the books because there's it's the, how do I put it? In the books, it makes sense because that's where he's from. That's where they came from. So blah, blah, blah. However, I believe that, let's see, how to put this? The movie is different in an entirely different character as a whole. Like they are a different being entirely. Like there's nothing that makes them the same character as is in the book. And that's kind of hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because how is he depicted in the book?
In the book, it's much more unbalanced and kind of maniacal at the same time. But here, in the movie, it's, charismatic, friendly, bubbly in a way.
Do you think that the movie version, plays more into the idea that Pennywise is an entity that hungers off the fear of children, for him to be more inviting, to kind of lure his prey in, Or does it work better book-wise because in the book, he's more of this force of nature?
I think it works better in the book that he's a force of nature, essentially, or like a psychic nature. Because in the book, he's just this. It's not even a he. If anything, they're more feminine presenting because they have like eggs and whatnot in the book, and they have like this giant spider motif, like a mother spider. So honestly, it's more so appropriate to call Pennywise a she. But they really don't have a true gender or anything as well, so it's really impossible to define them. So it really kind of encapsulates the whole force of nature aspect that's in the book rather than the movie.
But you could even read that in some of Tim Curry's facial inflections in the movie. He's not necessarily overly masculine, right?
Right.
He kind of dances that line. Where in the book, I do know that the clown persona it's not as heavy as it is in the movies or the book or the TV series. That he becomes a ton of things in the book, the leper, the werewolf, right? Georgie, like he constantly shapeshifts to match the fear he needs. Where I guess it was cheaper in the TV series to just make him a clown for the most part, cut down on budget. And I think if Tim Curry didn't do such a great job, I think the movie would have steered a little bit further away from the clown motif and tried to be closer to the book. You know what I mean? I don't know. What do you think?
God, I'm not even sure how to put it. It's so hard to.
I know, right? Pennywise is one of the most interesting villains in literature because the more you peel back what Pennywise actually is, the more insane that this creature has decided to rest its head on this one pit point of the universe. In a weird way.
That's a good one. Yeah.
You know, given like what exactly Pennywise is. And I'm sure at some point we're going to go into spoilers about the nature of Pennywise and the line where he pretty much says, where the kids are saying, "Oh, I'm going to kill you." And Pennywise just laughs and says, "Kill." He's like, "I am eternal, child." You know, death is not something that I even comprehend, you know what I mean? So it's like Pennywise as a creature is interesting because even his weaknesses is not necessarily of the mortal plane, which is how the kids defeat him in the first place. It's based on will and belief.
Yeah, like the ritual of Chud in the book.
Mm-hmm. You know, the kids creating these power totems out of simple items that wouldn't hurt a fly. Right?
Yeah, but psychically they're just right.
Right? You know, battery acid. He sprays an inhaler on his face and his face melts. Why does that happen?
Because power.
It's very confusing.
It's imagination.
The power of imagination, right? But as an adult, you're like, why does that work? That doesn't make any sense. That's cheesy, right? It feels cheesy if you don't really think about it, right? Like, oh, okay, the kids just killed this monster and drove it back with a couple of nuggets and some inhaler juice. Like, how does that work? But as Pennywise feeds on fear, the kids become emboistered by their power totems and kind of, in a way, starve him of fear as they become more brave. And that drives him back, and that gives them the opening to take him down through the power of imagination, the power of will, and just overcoming their fear of Pennywise. And Pennywise, when the adults come back, for some reason he's telling them to go away because he knows there's nothing for him to be gained for killing them.
It's more so that they just don't taste as good. Pennywise goes on to say multiple times that children taste best when they're afraid. Because Pennywise isn't really a fear entity, it's an entity of just pure hunger.
Like consumption, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Can we talk about the giant turtle?
The giant turtle I missed so much.
Will they ever bring the giant turtle into this thing?
Completely doubtful.
I mean, if we can get a raccoon shooting a grenade launcher, we can get a giant turtle.
Ha! That's still like a bold to assume that's going to happen.
Bold and daring. That some plucky director is going to eventually talk the studio into making the giant turtle a thing. One day, in some iteration of this damn story, they're going to get the giant turtle in effect. And it's going to be dope.
Nah, son, it's just not going to happen.
I know, a man can dream. In closing, with parts 1 and 2 of 1990's Stephen King's It, do you feel that it did a good justice to the book?
It was different because it did and didn't at the same time. Mm-hmm. It did something new that was made it more almost charismatic and almost funny in a way, but it was not really the same book that people really expected it to be.
Yeah, right? And what is it about Stephen King works where directors feel they can just take whatever parts they want and change it all the way up?
That was like a big 90s movie thing in general. And honestly, it's not really that even like time-wise. People still do that to this day. They just butcher books because they think they can just cherry-pick the good stuff. Yeah, with quotation marks, because it really isn't good stuff. It's just what they think is convenient.
What they think is the good stuff kind of situation.
Yeah, very much.
And even with, like, of course, the great Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, it's kind of a very similar situation. You know, where the director kind of cherry picks the parts he likes and remixes the movie to what they want it to be about.
Yep.
And as iconic as Tim Curry's role is in this film, and as influential as this TV series is, it's not perfect. It's very goofy at times. Its pacing is very weird, even though the edit we saw was really good. But part 1 and 2, it's really like no one ever talks about part 2. Everybody talks about part 1. You know what I mean?
Yeah, honestly, everybody talks about part 1.
You know what I mean? No one remembers. Like I remember vaguely what happened at the end of part 2. And I was like, oh, the Harryhausen giant spider. I totally forgot about that. And how they just rip it apart with their bare hands at the end. Like, what? How are they going to do that in the new movie?
Low key, that's pretty great, but at the same time, not really.
Not really, man. It was super dated, dude. Like I said, I didn't like the depiction of women in this series, but that's kind of not the series' fault. That's kind of Stephen King's fault.
Yeah, King didn't really write Bev that well, Engine.
Not that well, just saying it all. So the series as a whole, how many paper airplanes would you give this series from 0 to 5?
I give it a good 4. It's enjoyable still.
Very generous. I would give it a 3.5. And a lot of that 3 is Tim Curry. Like, don't mind you, John Ritter is amazing in this. As I mentioned earlier, Henry Anderson is great in this. Tim Reed as Mike is great. Annette O'Toole as Beverly. You know, it doesn't completely hold up. On rewatch, it does get a bit slow. I found myself trailing off at certain times. But it's one of those things where Pennywise is very rarely on screen, which is always the best monsters.
Yeah.
That aren't overdone. But when he is, it's damn near amazing. You know, it's spellbinding, Tim Curry's performance. And if you've never seen this, or you want to see It, the old school It, and I was talking to a friend earlier, and I was like, hey, I'm watching the 90s It. There was like, there's another one? I was like, yeah, the original. Oh, I thought there was only the one that came out like a couple of years ago. No, there is this one. But Tim Curry's in it. Oh, I have to see it. Like, you've never heard of this movie. They're like, no. I'm like, oh, geez. You know? So I'm like, check this out. I definitely recommend it. And you can draw your own conclusion. Next, we're actually going to be reviewing the new series, the new film adaptations of It, respectively. So we're going to be reviewing It Chapter 1 very shortly on the next MOTN-Trospective. This is kind of our Inso Facto Halloween special as well. Around here, we love Halloween. We love this time of the year, and I always want to do something special. And launching our introspective, I think, is the best way to go about that, especially with this series that has caused so much terror and so much imagination for decades. Why not start here? What better place in here, what better time than now?
It's Spooktober.
Where can we find you, Austin?
At Austin Ozzy on Twitter and Twitch.
And you can find us here at mastersofthenerdiversecast.com. That is our website. So if you want to listen to any of our past episodes, are Ready to Scare, where we do a critique of the fashion of Hellraiser. I totally forgot I did that. That's such a good episode. Shout outs to the Peter Porker podcast. Wherever you are, those guys rule. You can listen to all of our past episodes on mastersofthenerdiversecast.com. You can also find us on Twitter, which is at mnerdiverse, where Mike G and Austin just post random things and talk about comic books and what's going on in the world. And if you want to support us monetarily, you can also do so via our Patreon, which is patreon.com/MOTN, where $1 a day keeps the mind goblins away. That they do. But if you want to support us non-monetarily, you can always do so by liking our content, by subscribing to our channels, and by commenting on our posts, because feedback's important. Until next time, I've been your host, Mike G.
And I've been your host, Austin Ozzy.
And we will always ask you to look deep inside of your mind.